My name is Greg Edris. I work as an extension agronomist here at the center. I've been here a long time, and probably be here a few more years anyway. Very pleased to serve as a host for the session of this group today. So we've got 7 offerings in the room, and we're starting with managing herbicide-resistant weeds. And the person that's going to cover that subject is Alicia Harstad. She is originally from North Dakota, from the Buffalo area. She received a master's degree from NDSU in plant sciences, specifically weed science. And she has a short career so far in extension. Hope we keep her for a long time. She started at Steele County in 2012, and just recently, just this fall, she moved to Stutsman County in Jamestown.
Well, good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. All right, we're going to talk about weed resistance. And I called my talk the battle against weed resistance because really it's a big big tug of war type of a deal when you're talking about weed resistance. Unfortunately, nature's always got the upper hand. Our weeds have been able to come over any of our weed management practices, and with chemicals, they've been able to survive herbicides by altering target sites, altering herbicide metabolic processes, altering the herbicide location in the plant, and also target site amplification. Which, when you think about that, that's a lot of science, but it's really cool. Weed resistance isn't cool, but the fact that plants are able to come over this, we really got to be on top of how we're managing our weeds. Because if we keep controlling weeds with the same modes of action, we're always going to lose. And also, even when we're talking about cultural control, kochia, it used to only have 1 flush in the spring. Well, now we're starting to see later emerging flushes of kochia. And so, even some of the culture of weed control management practices, weeds have been able to get over them. So let's look at what resistant weeds we have here in the state. This is a list of the confirmed resistant weeds in North Dakota. It's a long list, but I just kind of wanted to show that. One of the weeds that I think is a big problem and really need to keep an eye out is kochia. Just simply when you look at this list, the number of modes of actions that it is resistant in North Dakota. Then also another one we really need to keep a good eye on is our glyphosate-resistant weeds, which is horseweed, kochia, common ragweed, and water hemp. So these are glyphosate-resistant weeds that we have here in North Dakota now. But the big thing you've got to keep in mind is what is your enemy on your farm? You know, I just showed you the list of what resistant weeds we have in North Dakota, but what are your problematic weeds on your farm? And one way we need to be doing that is looking at scouting out the field. Be looking for a wide range of symptoms. If you're seeing weeds, you know, with a variety of injury symptoms, some that are dead, some that are slightly injured, some that are normal, that's a red flag. You know, that might be an indication that you could be having some resistance issues on your farm. And here's another picture of kochia. We have some that's healthy, some that's dead. That's a red flag. Those are the fields you want to make notes of. Keep track of where those areas are, and those are going to be your main focus areas. You know, take note what weeds were out there. Because you know, I showed you the list of all the resistant weeds that are in North Dakota. Chances are you don't have every single one of those on your farm. So what are the weeds that are on your farm that you need to be watching? This is where the strategy part comes in. If you're in a battle, you need to come up with your strategy. What are you going to do to overcome your enemy? And so the best way to do that is to utilize the best management practices. We'll go through some of those. Number 1 is don't forget the pre. So these next couple of pictures that I'm showing you are actually from a farm my husband farms. This was a field actually 2 years ago. There was a skip with a sprayer with a pre-merge. This was after a glyphosate application. So you can see the rest of the field looks pretty clean, but the area where there wasn't a pre looks like a disaster. Doesn't even look like it was sprayed. So that just kind of shows you how big of an influence pre's can have. Here's another picture that's from our farm. This is a different field that was last year. You see where the sprayer went with the pre-merge? Went right along the edge here. That's where we stopped. Because sometimes this is a wet area, wet sloughie area. Sometimes we'll try and come back with barley if it works. But you can see the distinct difference. This area was actually sprayed with glyphosate. This area looks pretty clean. You see down here, there's a little yellowing. So that to me is a huge red flag. This is one of our fields we're making notes of, making sure we're keeping a good eye on the kochia. Here's another picture in the actual field. So part of this field did get the pre-merge, the other part did not get pre-merge. It was raining and we were trying to, basically the sprayer was following the planter, we're trying to get it planted, and we weren't able to get it all sprayed. So this is the area that did not get the pre-merge. This is after 32 ounces of glyphosate. This is what was left. So this to me, huge red flag. We did able to come back with glyphosate Flexstar. We were able to get most of them under control. But here, this is a indication you got some dead plants, some that are, kind of half dead. So pre-emergence are extremely important. And now we're coming out. There's going to be 2,4-D dicamba resistant beans. It's going to be extremely important that we're using pre-merge herbicides with new technologies. I was at a meeting about a year ago, and there was the chemical reps, the seed reps from all the companies that are coming out with the new technologies, and every single one of them said that you need to make sure you're using a pre with these new technologies. Otherwise, you're not going to be getting the full effect out of them. So the second thing we really need to think about too is spraying small weeds. We've been spoiled the last while when glyphosate was working well that we're able to go in and spray large weeds. But this field here, now this was a prevent plant field, so take that with a grain of salt that there wasn't any crop in here. But this had been sprayed with glyphosate. The weeds they're large. So you can see there's some yellow, but there wasn't much control. So we need to make sure that we're going out there and trying to get out there as timely as we can. Obviously, with rain and wind and some of the great weather that we get here in North Dakota, it can be difficult sometimes to get things in timely. But there, if you have a pre-emerge on, that can help widen that window that you have. You want to make sure that we're reducing the amount of seed that is produced out in the field. That's probably the number one thing that we really want to focus on, is making sure that the weeds that are out in the field don't produce seed. So we can reduce the amount of seed that is in the seed bank. And field margins, those are tough areas that we don't want to be looking like this. You can have a really nice clean field, but then all the seed that's produced here is just gonna make your weed problem that much worse. So this is where you want to go out and do whatever you can if chemical control fails you. Use other control methods, whether it's hand weeding, mowing, tillage. Another thing thinking about is cultural control. Maybe having on those really problematic fields, coming up with narrow row spacing, so you have a canopy sooner. Anything that you can use to reduce your weed population, that's what you want to be doing. And rotate, rotate, rotate. And this really means rotate everything. Because unfortunately, when something works one year, you don't want to use that same exact system the next year. Because if you keep using the same system, eventually you'll end up with resistance. So crop rotation can be a good tool. If you incorporate small grains and corn and soybean rotation, you're adding more modes of action. You want to make sure to be rotating modes of action. Pay attention to what modes of action are in your herbicides. For better or for worse, it seems now chemical companies have a lot of trade names for a lot of the same products. And also, they're starting to tank mix active ingredients, which is good, except then it makes it a little tougher to keep track of where your modes of action are when there's that many more trade names. Generally on labels at the bottom where it says what the active ingredient is, there will also be numbers, which is what the active ingredients are. So make sure you're rotating the number that corresponds with the mode of action. agricultural control, chemical control that you can do culturally as well as chemically to control your weeds. You want to be using them together. Going back and talk a little bit about mode of action. Here's the list. Now this is for soybeans, because generally speaking, broadleaf control in soybeans is probably where our worst weed resistance problems are. So some of the worst weeds we have is ragweed, water hemp, and kochia. And these are herbicides that are labeled for control of these weeds in soybeans. So does anyone see anything in common? These, all these herbicides have the same mode of action. They're all PPOs. So we're relying very heavily on our PPOs, and this is not good. And also, Cobra and Flexstar, those are pretty much our only two herbicides that we can use against kochia post-emergence for a little bit larger kochia. So beyond that, we don't really have any other herbicides. So we need to make sure that we are using our herbicides wisely. And here is in the back of the soybean section and of the corn section in the weed control guide. I didn't bring any because in a couple of weeks here we're going to be getting the 2015 weed guide. But if you go into the corn section and also in the soybean section, there's 2 pages that have a breakdown of different chemical recommendations that you can use in Roundup Ready crops. So the first part of the section talks about pre-burn down herbicides, and then these are all pre-herbicides that you can use. And then also in there it talks about the rate, also has the cost, and then has the control ratings of tough to kill weeds that we have in Roundup Ready crops. And these control ratings are assuming that these weeds are Roundup resistant. So this is very useful because you can pick out what weeds are your problematic ones, pick a product that works well. And then here's the bottom part. It talks about all the post-emergence herbicides. So this is the first page, so it has a breakdown of all the pre's and posts that are labeled. And then here's the second page. The second page comes up with a combination of products that you can use. It has the early pre-plant burn down, and then a combination of pre-pot products that you can use. And then the last section has the pre followed by post weed management programs. So here's a good guideline that you can go through and put together a weed management program that you can use on your farm. And this is for the soybean section. And so you go back to that first page where you pick a residual herbicide, residual pre, and then you can use a post-emergence product. So it's got combinations of products on here. So it's a very useful tool, and it's in the weed guide. So just kind of a summary of the best management practices. We want to make sure we're not forgetting the pre. Pre's are extremely important. Spray small weeds. We want to think zero tolerance when it comes to seed production. So anything that is going to prevent seed production, that's what we want to be doing. And rotate, rotate, rotate. That means rotate pretty much any weed management program that you can come up with. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our next threat, because we looked at the list of corn-resistant weeds in North Dakota. Our next threat is Palmer amaranth. This weed is really nerve-wracking. It is a relative of water hemp. You've heard how bad water hemp is. I like Zollinger's quote really well. If water hemp is evil, then Palmer amaranth is the devil. So we definitely don't want it here. It's not in North Dakota yet. So that is our key, is we have time to get on top of this and be watchful for it. So here's a picture of what it looks like. Here's a distribution map of Palmer amaranth. This map was as of 2009. All the green areas is where it's at. 2010 it was in Indiana. 2011 in Michigan. 2013 Iowa. And this last fall it was found by Aberdeen. So that's really nerve-wracking. It's right knocking at our door here. So we want to be very watchful of this weed. And this year, 2014, Palmer amaranth was weed of the year. and it's in the running for 2015. I'm not sure exactly what 2015 weed is going to be. But this was the top 10 reasons of why it was Weed of the Year. It's not North Dakota yet. We can be proactive. The seed is decimated through custom combining and feed, which means it's being moved by humans, so we need to be watchful of that. It grows extremely fast. It can grow upwards to 2 inches a day, long emergence pattern, so it's going to be an issue all through the growing season. Can produce more than 1 million seeds per plant. Now this is the one that's really mind-blowing. 1 million seeds per plant is a lot. And then it does have a short seed life, which is good, but considering how many seeds it produces, once it's established, it's hard to control. And the plants are huge. They can be upwards to greater than 10 feet tall. The girth can be 5 to 6 inches, and the seed heads can be 1 to 2 feet. So these things are not going to be able to go through a combine. Another thing, cold plants can re-root themselves. So, you know, in the southern states, they have been resorting to hand weeding to control palmer amaranth, but they actually have to physically remove the weeds out of the field, otherwise they'll reestablish. Soybean yield loss has been reported to 78%, corn yield has been reported to 91%, and here's the last really bad part is it's resistant to pretty much all of our broadleaf control herbicides, which means we have very few weed management, chemical weed management options for palmer amaranth. Here's some pictures of what it looks like. This is what water hemp looks like, this is what red pigweed looks like, and this is palmer amaranth. So it looks very similar to water hemp and red pigweed because it is in the pigweed family. But it's something you really want to keep an eye out for. If you look like you have some water hemp or red root pigweed that's on steroids, it could be palmer amaranth. And here's some more identifying pictures. One thing is it looks more like a poinsettia than some of the other growth habits. It could have a spike on the tip. Female plants have the spindly brackets. Leaf petiole is long and smooth stem. So just a few more pictures to give you an idea of what it looks like. Here's some pictures that to show you how the size of this weed can get. Here's the brackets. They're just the flowering structures. They're a couple feet. And here's a picture of a Purdue weed scientist. He's 6'6". And look at how much taller that is than him. So these things can get monstrous. So with that, I just want to conclude with what is your weed management strategy? Rotate the best management practices, know your mode of action, and take notes. Make sure you're out your field, making sure you know what weeds are your problematic weeds and where they're at.
What's the best breed for soybeans?
Well, there's a few options. If you go into the weed guide, if you go into that soybean section, I would look there. But the important thing is, if you're on the same field, you don't want to be using the same tree time after time. So come up with maybe 2 that you really like and rotate those. So that's the tough part about weed control is a lot of other things. You come up with a variety of corn or soybeans that you like, and so you plant in the next couple of years or whatever. And with weed management, we got to come up with about 2 things that we like and rotate those. And we're going to really have to start thinking of weed management as a whole system part. What did we do last year? What are we going to do this year? What are we going to do next year?
If you want some herbicides to start with, David, it depends on the pocketbook, of course, but Spartan would be a good one, or Authority, and something that contains Valor would be another option. Also Zidua, a newer product. And then take mixing into those with metribuzin. Metribuzin is the old Centor, relatively inexpensive compared to Spartan especially. And so those would be 4 products that come to mind that would be really good. Are they inexpensive? No. Well, metribuzin isn't bad, but it's going to cost more than the old 2-time application of glyphosate. Got to get used to that. We're going to be paying $40 or $50 an acre for herbicide instead of much less.
Well, I think it's also important too to know what fields are your most problematic. Those are the ones you really want to be focusing a lot of energy on. You know, do you have a kosher problem in this one field? That's because you don't probably need to be spending a bunch of money on every single acre, but.
Liberty Link needs is better than Roundup Ready for wildlife. It's a different chemical.
Liberty, I think there's gonna be more Liberty Link beans out this year too, just because of glyphosate, but we gotta be careful not to depend on it either. And Liberty is much different than Roundup. You want high water volume, and it's a contact herbicide, so you need to make sure you have good coverage, and it works better in warmer temperatures. So I think it's gonna be a good option, especially if you have some of those fields where you are suspecting that you have glyphosate